So, Danny, let's address the first thing. Let's call it the elephant in the room currently in what's unfolding in mainstream media revolving the disclosure process.
Mm-hmm.
There's different camps out there that are curious, some are fearful, some believe they already have the answer for the way things are going to go down. There's a history of cover up.
Right.
What would you say to Stephen Greer in this current situation and where you've been positioned to try and fight for the best result in terms of disclosure that this community deserves?
Mm-hmm. Well, Darcy, it isn't just Stephen. There's a whole lot of people in the UFO community over the years that has sort of burgeoned since the beginning, actually, 1945 with the Donald Kehoe observations, but it really picked up in 1947 in July with the Roswell recovery of the craft and the bodies and stuff. And the community has for 75 years now been confronted by this conscious program of duplicity, cover up, deception, and actual aggressive destruction of dozens and dozens and dozens of people's lives who have simply been trying to report honestly about their experience of seeing a UFO, having apparently direct contact with some of the occupants of the UFOs, and they've been set upon. And so that it's understandable that a lot of people in the community are highly distrusting of the intelligence community, people that are involved in the United States military, even government structures, congressmen, senators, executive branch officers, who've all been engaging in this conscious program of destroying people who are trying to be involved in this. Richard Dolan, for example, has now extracted the previously classified documents through the Freedom of Information Act that show the actual memos going back and forth. It was before they had email, but these memos going back and forth in the Defense Department, inside the Central Intelligence Agency, and others saying, look, our job is to suppress this information. Our job is to destroy the credibility of anybody who tries to report this. Anybody inside the military ranks who tries to file a report about this, they need to be punished, so that we know positively that that's been going on. And so what that does is it generates a perfectly understandable position on the part of a lot of people saying, look, at anybody who's involved in any of these intelligence services within the military is to be distrusted. They're engaged in a kind of campaign of duplicity, and anybody who comes out of that community has to be distrusted, especially if they come out of the community, the intelligence community, and they start flogging the same meme, that, oh, these are a threat, we need more money for the military, we need to have a bigger military, we need to, put weapons in space, we have to defend ourselves against these things, etc. So that's totally understandable. But what a lot of those folks don't know right now is something that I mentioned this morning, that on June 4th, Friday morning, Lou Elizondo I was contacted by the Associated Press, and they wanted to get a response initially from me as to what I thought, as Lou's lawyer, what I thought about the leaks that were published in the New York Times on the 8 p.m. Eastern time by the New York Times about an alleged source or sources they had high up in the administration who had access to the classified annex to this upcoming June 25th report, in which they were specifically making allegations that none of the technology, well, what they actually said technically is that of the vast majority of the 120 specific UAP incidents that the task force, the UAP task force inside the Office of Naval Intelligence had reviewed in preparation for their report on June 25th to the Senate Intelligence Committee, that of the vast majority of those incidents were not any high-level, ultra-secret technology of the United States government. Now, if you look at that closely, that's suggesting that some of them were, because it's saying that the vast majority of them were not.
Not all.
That's right.
But many of them were not.
That's what they said. Well, they said the majority, the clear majority of those 120 incidents that they reviewed were not representative of any high technology that the U.S. government did. So if you read it closely, as a lawyer would, and you really look at that, you say, wow, that is suggesting that they think that some of them were. Now, that is, of course, the same thing that Stephen Greer is saying, and others are saying in the community who are very knowledgeable about the fact that these craft have been recovered. There's been a clear campaign, a secret campaign of trying to back engineer them. There's all kinds of witnesses that talk about having participated in that program. They've talked about the different kind of craft that they have, the flux liner. There's all kinds of these things. So that, or if in fact, what was being said by the United States Defense Department source or the administration source was that none of these 120 instances represent any kind of high super secret technology, that would be one thing. But that isn't what they're saying. All they're saying is that a major majority of these 120 incidents were not, in fact, any type of technology, super secret technology of the U.S. government. So that's important to get clear as about what it is they were actually saying. Okay, and one of the things that Lou Elizondo seized upon in the interview that we had, he and I had a joint interview with the Associated Press with Dan Huff and Norman and the other fellow. That what Lou Elizondo said is, look, that he knows that he was affirming that the vast majority of those 120 instances were not any super technology that we have. Potentially even, more or less, not saying it specifically, but leaving open the question as to whether or not some of them were, right? So that there isn't really necessarily a fundamental dispute going on between Stephen Greer and the people in the community who share that view that we have the technology, we are displaying and deploying some of the technology, but the fact that the sources were saying that the report says that the vast majority of the 120 incidences that they looked at did not represent such high-level U.S. technology. But what they were doing is they were opening onto their next finding, which was that they weren't able to completely dismiss the fact that it might be foreign adversary technology. The important thing to point out is that Lou Elizondo, in his June 4th interview, said that isn't true. That
These
isn't
are
true.
not from China.
They're not from China. They're not from Russia. He said, as I pointed out this morning, said that would represent the most catastrophic failure of intelligence in our history. He said, and that's not true. That they don't belong to Russia. They don't belong to China. The fact is, we have active intelligence about what they've got, and it isn't that. And so he said emphatically, it's got to be something else. Okay. Now that's the important piece to take away from that. When you get Lou Elizondo, the head of the ATIP program inside the Pentagon, saying this isn't Russian, most of this isn't Russian technology, it isn't Chinese technology, and most of it isn't ours, it's something else. And even then when they ask him, like, what do you mean by something else? He says, you have to consider that this may be extraterrestrial in origin, and even goes to the length of saying it might be extra-dimensional. He says both of those things in the interview. Now, that's completely consistent with what Stephen Greer says. Both of these things may be true. Extraterrestrial origins, extra-dimensional origins. What Stephen Greer and others in the community say, they focus on that negative pregnant that's in the observations in the New York Times, is that we may well have some of this technology. We may well be deploying some of this technology. The question as to what percentages of it are our technology, not Chinese or Russian, but what percentages of it might be ours, that's subject to examination and investigation. But I think both Lou and both in Stephen Greer and others are saying that look at, if some of this is our technology, that may be true, okay, and that covers the argument, the purported argument between the two of them, because if in fact we have any technology like that at all, it's another whole step to take of trying to say, well, that would indicate that therefore there's this major project going on for them to try to have a false flag attack.
Right. So that's the next part of the question. To quell some of the fears that are out there, that Lou is some kind of instrument in playing that next card of a age-old tale that there's going to be a false flag alien attack on the planet. How can you alleviate some of those fears that Lou consciously is not being, he's not part of that orchestration. He wants people to know that he's not seeing any aggression from these studies that they've done over the AATIP program, and he just wants better insights into what they are and that they're taken seriously, so we know we're not alone in the universe.
Well, it's a complex issue when you get some people, and it isn't just Stephen, it isn't just Dr. Greer, in the UFO community, who are so offended, legitimately, about the way the United States Defense Department, the intelligence services, the Central Intelligence Agency, the DIA, the Defense Intelligence Agency, the way that they've been acting down through the decades, entitles people to be extremely suspicious. Okay, even perhaps to be over suspicious. As I commented in the interview that I gave with Stephen Greer back in the 20th anniversary of the Disclosure Project that we did down in Arizona, that I gave a big hour-long interview, and I stated very specifically, I do not agree with Stephen that the evidence of our having potentially developed some of this technology would necessarily lead one to the conclusion that they're going to engage in this big hoax, this big false flag attack, and pretend it's an alien attack so they can justify getting billions of more dollars. I don't think you need to go that far. That I'm more conservative in my judgment about this than Stephen is, and some people in the community are. But the fact of the matter is, what I want to do is put myself into a position to be able to find out what the information is there. That's the key to this, rather than hypothesizing it, suggesting it, prophesying it, or predicting it. I'm not in the prediction business. I'm in the business of trying to find it out, and I've spent 50 years in that business of finding out things that the people in the public interest community are very worried about, are concerned about. But I don't go to the lengths of concluding that it must be true. It may be true.
But you still respect his concerns.
Sure, I do. Sure, no, absolutely, I do. I respect his concerns. I respect the concerns that Lou Elizondo says, that he is in possession of certain intelligence information that he's concerned about revealing, because he's afraid of the same forces inside the Defense Department, inside the intelligence, coming after him. And that's why I joined with Lou and agreed to represent him to put together a complaint into the Inspector General's office to investigate to find out what's going on in there. Who is this inside the Defense Department? They're lying about Lou and saying that he never had anything to do with ATIP, that ATIP never existed, that these UFOs are not real, that they're still flogging that old horse. So the key is to find out, what's going on inside the Defense Department. So what we've tried to do is to task the Inspector General's office inside the Defense Department to investigate that. And so that we're actively engaged in trying to get an investigation going inside the Defense Department's Inspector General's office to find out what's going on in there.
There's some people that misunderestimate the amount of work that you've done in the past for certain issues that are, serious political and major historic fiascos, including Watergate, for example. And you brought up this morning how you were in a class that was taught by Henry Kissinger.
Yeah.
Can you kind of say that line he gave again? I think it's really brilliant, and just identify the United States' role in kind of the mess we are in globally right now.
Sure. What the incident is that we're talking about here is that back in 1965, it must have been 66, by the time I was in the class, Gov 182 is a big class at Harvard College, undergraduate school. And it's American foreign policy. It was taught by Henry Kissinger, who went on later to become the National Security Advisor for Nixon, Secretary of State, and all of that. Or National Intelligence Advisor, National Security Advisor, right? So he had a number of different posts in there in the government. This was before that, when he was a consultant. A lot of people consulted, but he in the very first class, they have this thing they call shopping week at Harvard College, where you go to sample different courses that whether you want to take them or not. And Henry Kissinger, in the first lecture in Gov 182 back in 66, this would be, said, you gentlemen, if there's anyone in this course who believes that our nation state of the United States is not authorized to lie, cheat, steal, kill, on behalf of the interests of our nation state, you should not be in this course, and it said it just like that. And so that it was said this morning in the context of this nation state structure that had been set up since the Treaty of Westphalia, like in 1547 or so, that the royal families of Europe all gathered together and entered into this pact that they would recognize the nation state as a viable and legitimate juridical instrument and structure, and that they would respect each other's nation states, and at the same time they would compete as nation states, and that the dialectic that exists between nation states competing for resources, competing for world hegemony and cultural hegemony, has been going on ever since then. Whereas it used to go on between royal families or between tribes, and that this is in my opinion, a structural sin on the part of our human family to have allowed this system to dominate our cultural discussions. And so I raise that point. And the fact of the matter is that the United States government, the United States nation state, has played a major, overwhelmingly dominant role in being the aggressor. Ever since the robber baron era and the ascendancy of the age that they call the age of American imperialism. I mean, that's what it's called in high school courses, but they're trying to pretend that it was over somehow. That after Manifest Destiny, after marching, off the East Coast across the Appalachians onto the plains and slaughtering and killing the Native American people, and driving the Hispanic people out of California, and and then initiating the Spanish-American War and taking over, and dominating all of South America, like as if suddenly it stopped. It never has stopped. It's continued on. And the people have been subjected to some type of a propaganda program to lead people to believe that they're not still engaged in that, and they have been engaged in that, and people don't even know anything about the fact that a major private investment firm of these top 50 families that were the robber baron families during the robber baron era, which is also another phrase that is completely accepted in high school civics courses, of the robber baron era from the end of the American Civil War in 1868 to 1898, when the administration came in 1898. That this was a complete era when the robber barons, these families, took over a monopoly control of the major industry in the United States, the making iron and steel, the railroads, the shipping lines, the telegraph and communication companies, the agribusiness companies. They took them over, and they established monopoly control over these things.
So then that leads me to my next question. Do you believe that, and this is hypothesized by Greer and some other investigators out there, that what we're seeing in the Tic Tac UFO video, the Go Fast gimbal video, might be a private corporation's secretly manufactured vehicle that is some kind of higher tech than the American Navy or Air Force truly knows about. And that's what we're seeing in that video. Could that technology that we're seeing not be ET, or are you pretty confident, and is Lou pretty confident that it is something from off-world?
So it's a fact question that needs to be investigated. The question about whether or not President Harry Truman, immediately after the Roswell incident, actually set up a group called MJ-12 or Majestic 12, or by some other designation, or Zodiac, or whatever it is. I know of other instances where actually Truman himself set up an entirely private group, mainly when a lot of the treasure was found in the Philippine Islands at the end of World War II. The G2, the head of U.S. Army Intelligence for the Philippines, Edward Lansdale, recovered 12 of the troves of treasure that General Fukushima, or anyway, one of the Japanese general Fukuyama buried in the Philippines. That 12 of those 176 troves were unlocked by Lansdale, and what they did is they ended up. He flew immediately to go meet with MacArthur, who was the head of the Pacific Command at the end of World War II, and revealed the fact that they found these, and it was valued at $1.2 trillion. And he went and told his commanding officer, MacArthur, about it. MacArthur brought in his G2, Willoughby, the guy's name was Charles Willoughby, and then had Willoughby and Lansdale fly in MacArthur's private plane all the way back to Washington, D.C. to meet with President Truman privately, to tell them that they had found this treasure trove. And what Truman did was he brought in his chief of staff, who was Clark Clifford, and brought in the Secretary of War, that was General Stilwell, and Stilwell brought in his two deputies, three deputies actually, a man by the name of Robert Lovett, a man by the name of Robert Anderson, both of whom, in private life, were senior partners in Brown Brothers Harriman, a big private investment firm made up of these 50 wealthy families that were the robber barons that basically monopolized all the major areas of the U.S. economy. And another fellow named John J. McCloy. And they put them in charge of a trust, a private trust, to handle the $1.2 trillion and left it outside of the control of the United States government, outside of the State Department, outside of the Defense Department. They set that up in that private group that was based at Brown Brothers Harriman. The CEO for Brown Brothers Harriman was George Herbert Walker, who is the maternal grandfather of George Herbert Walker Bush, and the grandfather of George Walker Bush, George W. Bush. And he was the CEO of that. And their lawyer was Alan Dulles, who went on to become the first civilian director of the Central Intelligence Agency. It was set up in 1947. And so that we know that there's historical precedent for this type of a privatization of an extraordinarily important asset or resource that they have, and that they use it at the interest
the economy.
to control it for the interests of those investors that were at Brown Brothers Harriman and their law firm Sullivan and Cromwell. They choreographed the utilization of that resource for their benefit. Now, so that we have a direct example of this, and this is in 1945. We know that happened December of 1945. So when you get to July of 1947, if it's true, which I believe it is, that there was a downed saucer, at Roswell, and they recovered the technology in the bodies, and they came and told Truman about that. It's entirely understandable that Truman might have done something just exactly like is projected as Majestic 12, is to bring together a group of private people that are very powerful and influential, and you bring them together and you put them together to have them determine what ought to be done with this technology. So it's possible. So what I'm saying is that it doesn't mean it's.
But we were still seeing saucers, within 10 years of 1947. So anybody who says that that's our craft in 10 years.
Yeah, that's right. Well, anybody who said it was our craft in 1947, when the Roswell crash occurred, and that's what Lou Elizondo says. This is nuts. To think that that all these craft must be something that is back engineered from an original craft that we found. That you know that the UFO people had such a craft back in 1947. China didn't have it. Russia didn't have it. We didn't have it by 1950.
And then
any chance of it.
Fast forward 70 years to the 2004 events, Tic Tac UFO, the gimbal stuff. Were we able to use that time wisely and produce that type of vehicle to elude our own military? Is that so? You're on a fact-finding mission.
Yes.
You don't know for sure.
Nobody knows. Nobody knows for sure. I mean, nobody in our UFO community knows for sure. Nobody knows. But people can. It's totally understandable that people would speculate, that people would try to develop certain theories or theses to explore. But one has to be very careful about conflating that with knowing positively that one of these is the answer to this. So what I'm saying is that the New Paradigm Institute that I'm proposing be established is to look into these questions, to get answers to these questions, take all of the information and evidence that everybody has, some of which has caused some people to form very firm conclusions about this, and examine that. And so it doesn't do any good to have one group just absolutely insisting that something is true, the other group insisting it's absolutely not true, and then having all this kind of horizontal dispute be going on. We can figure out how to resolve that.
It's disappointing too, isn't it? I mean, we're at this point in time that some folks like Grant Cameron is referred to as the Super Bowl of ufology, where we have this amazing opportunity on a global media stage to demonstrate that there's something real here and that it should be taken seriously and that there's a real history to it that's been well covered up. But there's all this infighting. There's all these people.
There's not a lot of it, actually. That some people have larger platforms in the media than others do. And so that they could take a position, very firm position, one way or another on one of these disputes, and it may make it appear that the dispute is bigger than it is. And there can be kind of a lack of clear understanding of what each of the various parties are saying about this, that people may be not drilling down tightly enough on, that can cause the appearance of conflict. But we just need to be extremely careful here. I don't tend to focus on the negative things about this. If you're playing in a football game in college, and the refs have made a couple bad calls, You don't spend all your time in the huddle whining about the bad calls. What you do is get busy. Get focused on it. You got the next plane coming up. Let's not whine about these things. Let's get to it. And I'm not attributing any one or the other to be doing the whining here. But what I'm saying is that we have to avoid this kind of horizontal conflict and try to stay focused on an upward, positive, forward trajectory of this inquiry that we're engaged in. That I'm confident from my conversations and representations of the disclosure process, the disclosure project, that there's good faith inside that community that includes Dr. Greer of trying to do everything that they can do reasonably to get this information exposed and the true demographics of the information. How much have we back engineered? How much of these sightings might be our own equipment? And how much of it is UFO stuff? But they always Dr. Greer obviously acknowledges that there are active UFO craft that are not, in fact, any back engineered craft from the United States government, because there's a source for the back engineering, and so that he acknowledges that they're there and they're active, and he also is very much involved in trying to figure out whether they're from an extraterrestrial civilization, whether they're extra-dimensional, or what aspects of the UFO phenomenon that may be extraterrestrial give the appearance of being extra-dimensional because of how they transit from other star systems to here. There's all kinds of extraordinarily important questions that need to get examined here.
Scientific.
There's scientific questions that have to be answered, fact questions. So that what I'm proposing is a leaving your guns at the door, of an institute to come together to leave your swords outside and sit down, and we try to get all the information possible on the table, and that people get past their tensions or conflicts or disputes over who's getting enough funding or not enough funding or whatever is going on, and transcend that. There's a thing in social justice work that they call the pedagogy of the oppressed. And what it is that when you have a culture or a community that's repressed by a more powerful group, such as American imperialism in Central America, etc., what happens is the local communities or the Native American communities are completely oppressed by a dominating European culture. And what happens is they feel helpless about being able to penetrate to the people that are really oppressing them, and the energy goes horizontal, and they start disputing things with each other. It's a well-known sociological phenomenon.
Right.
And psychological phenomenon. So what we want to do is transcend this right now. We want to say, look, there's an extraordinary opportunity that's here in front of us right now. And what we want to do is we do not want to trust entirely the government institutions or even people who reportedly left the government institutions and have now gotten religion. We don't have to absolutely trust anybody here. What we have to do is make inquiries. What we have to do is get everybody to put their information on the table, look at what is here. But the interview that was done by the Associated Press of Lou Elizondo on Friday, June 4th, is an extraordinarily important watershed event, because in it, Lou Elizondo, emphatically insists that these craft are not Russian or not Chinese. And he's the head of the whole program that was investigating all of this, and he says that he's virtually positive that they're not. Whether or not some of them are ours or not, that Dr. Greer is maintaining, there's no joint direct issue on that. There's no real conflict there.
Yeah.
So what we're trying to do now is to find out, what percentage of these sightings are not our technology, not Chinese technology, not Russian technology, but are something else. And the question is, what is that other else? Are they from an extraterrestrial civilization? Are they extra-dimensional? Are they time traveling? What are all the possible theories about this? Get them on the table and start examining them. And we can put to one side right now if some of these, if there is in fact more back engineered technology than has been admitted by the Defense Department or even by Lou Elizondo, then fine, then let's find out about that and find out what percentage of these sightings might be that. But it doesn't lead one to the automatic conclusion that just because you distrust the government so much, that it means there's automatically this false flag thing being planted. I said that in the interview that I did with the Disclosure Project. I don't agree with that yet. But as Dr. Greer has said, that it's much better to err on behalf of suspecting it might be true in order to make sure it doesn't happen,
Right.
than there isn't being too late on that.
Right.
I understand that.
Yeah.
I thoroughly understand that.
Mm-hmm.
And the same thing is true with Lou Elizondo. That Lou's saying, look, let them drift into this thing maybe as a foreign adversary of Russia or China, long enough to get the Congress to do something about it,
Mm-hmm.
And then tell them that it's not one of them.
Because it's incredibly hard to get funding.
Oh yeah.
It's hard to
you can't get their attention.
Yeah.
And so that may not be a wise tactic, and I've counseled against it, as you can tell.
Yeah.
And now Lou is being willing to tell the Associated Press that he's absolutely, to a high degree of certainty, that these are not Chinese or Russian, and that's an infinitesimal possibility. Okay, so that's an extraordinarily important advance in the conversation that's going on.
What's your next sort of step in this battle for proper disclosure? I know that June 25th is a hard date.
Mm-hmm.
If we get the documents that the New York Times had based their recent article on, and you get more thorough review of those, what is your next thing that you can say for sure you're going to do for the community, for your client Lou, and
for the client, the Disclosure Project,
yeah,
and for the client, the Citizens Commission,
yeah,
that all of these are active clients, and they all know about each other, and that I'm representing all of them. So what I'm trying to do is get everybody going in the same direction, and that I have now access to the Inspector General's office inside the Defense Department. I get to go sit down face to face with them and pressure them. They'll say, look, what is it you're willing to investigate here? Are you just going to investigate whether there's a couple bad apples inside the Defense Department that are lying about Lou Elizondo? Or are you going to find out what the hell they know about the UFO phenomenon? You got this other project that's been announced on the exact same day that Lou filed a complaint. Say, oh, we're going to look into finding out what activities the Defense Department has been engaged in with regard to the UAP phenomenon. That's a much broader perspective. There's another division, which is Space Intelligence and Engineering Oversight. It's a subdivision of the Inspector General's office. Lou and I sit down with that Inspector General coming up on Wednesday, the 15th. I fly right from here to there to go to Washington, D.C., to meet with Lou, to sit down with the Assistant Inspector General, push him to find out, what is it you're going to do? What are you evaluating? What are you willing to investigate here? How many subdivisions of the Inspector General's office are operational here? They're trying to investigate this thing. So we're trying to find out. And also when I talk to the media people, whether it's the New York Times, with Ralph Blumenthal at the New York Times, or we talk with Dan Huff and the other guys over at AP, or we talk with the CNN people, we're saying, look, do your job. Get after them. Find out what's going on. The amount that's going to be done by the Inspector General's office is very much dependent upon the amount of pressure that gets put on it.
Yeah.
By the media, by the American citizens. They're responsive. They're political instrumentality. And they'll respond if we do it. If we don't put the pressure on them, they'll just grind right to a stop. They'll do as little as they can get away with.
When you hear somebody say this new conspiracy theory, Lou Elizondo and all of these guys that represented the To the Stars Academy are just hired actors to push some new narrative. What do you say to that?
Oh, it's that theory is a little unsophisticated. It's not hired actors. I mean, all the people except for Tom DeLonge, the people that were involved in the To the Stars Academy, I use the past tense because it's almost defunct now. That I have stated openly and publicly that I viewed that entire operation as basically a DIA, Defense Intelligence Agency kind of covert operation to try to to push a little bit forward on the agenda by revealing those three famous videos, etc. So I think that's true. I still think that's true. But the fact of the matter is, it certainly did trigger a step in advance. What we have to do is head off the effort to turn that step into a direction of viewing him as a threat. In trying to get more money to deal with more weaponry for the Defense Department. We've got to head that thing off. And I think we're engaged in that process right now. Even to the point with Lou Elizondo now being willing, the head of the ATIC program, who was at the To the Stars Academy, resigning from the academy, in protest over the constant insistence that we treat these as a threat, because he doesn't believe they're a threat. So he'll say that, and he has said that now to the press, which he didn't say before.
Right, because the other accusation is, how come if they are a threat, they could have invaded and take over, hundreds of years ago?
Sure. I mean, when you drill down on a lot of these theories that are flying around, if you take your time and do it professionally and drill down on them, they start to fall apart. These theories that they're motivated by fear or projection or speculation, but they aren't that thoroughly thought through. Our job at the New Paradigm Institute is to think these things through thoroughly, to be open to everybody's theory, to be perfectly willing to listen to everybody, to ask them what their information is, what their sources are, to examine those sources. People know that I've been in this business for 50 years now. That I've got. I don't pretend to have lots of secret sources. What I do pretend is that I've got professional investigators, and that when you have an investigation going on, other sources can come to you and talk with you and share information. And so a lot of it depends on who the contacts are that your investigators have to figure out what the questions are we're going to be asking and what the forum is in which we're going to get some potential relief on this thing. All of those things are things that I've done in a number of other cases, all the way from the Terrence Silkwood investigation to publishing all 47 volumes of the top secret Pentagon papers, to the Watergate burglary and getting James. People freaked out when they figured out that I was at the law firm that was representing James McCord, who was the Watergate burglar. He was the CIA wiretapping specialist. He was like, what the hell is Danny Sheehan doing there? Because the whole point was to get McCord to blow the whistle on him, which he did. And he wrote the big long letter to Judge Sirica blowing the whistle on the plumbers and Nixon. He got Nixon impeached.
Right. So you're on the right side of history.
You just have to attempt to utilize the capacities that we have. My capacity happens to be being an attorney, trial attorney, constitutional litigation attorney. And what we need to do is bring this to the availability of the country, of the community, of the human family, to get people to come forward with the information that they've got and to put it on the table and let the American people in the world see what it is, and then let the chips fall where they're going to.
Now, just on a side note here, I am curious. We have had admission that there's this new organization, I believe it came out of the NSA, the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. In St. Louis. What do you think the relevance of that organization?
They've got all the documentation about Roswell there. They've got it there.
And probably more on
geospatial intelligence.
Everything around our planet.
Yeah, they're gonna have it.
Are you going to be engaging with that?
I'm going to try to get the Inspector General to include them in on as a target of going to them to find out what information do you have about whatever activities been undertaken by the government with relating to the UAP phenomenon. What have you got there? And I know from direct conversations I've had with people that they've got the Roswell information there.
Okay.
And nobody pays any attention to them. I can guarantee you, 99.999% of all the people in the UFO community don't even know that place exists.
Yeah, or the NRO and
people know about the National Reconnaissance Office.
Yeah, but what they're really investigating things that are going on in space outside of our planet is kind of a bigger question.
Mm-hmm. Well, but when you have when you have entire agencies inside the United States executive branch that people don't even know exist, and it's not that you can't find them on the internet. I mean, if you dig deep enough, you can find them, and they're just hiding there in the open.
But you don't understand really
They have
what
no
they're
any idea what they do. But when you have the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, and they're in St. Louis, Missouri, of all places, and that they've got the Roswell information, and I know that. Uh, and you have another group that's called the Electromagnetic Intelligence Center for the Central Intelligence Agency. Who the hell knew that thing existed? But when you start doing an investigation,
and are they involved with possibly some kind of private corporation building technology that
that would be
runs
elsewhere.
on a different energy
That
source?
would be elsewhere. That you have to find out where those alliances go on. That whole briefing in of corporations in the military defense industry, of briefing them in. The classic with Lockheed Martin and the Skunk Works and the Rand Corporation and S4 Area S4. And Rockwell and Bigelow Aerospace.
Yes.
There's a series of these companies that are, the Suma Corporation were involved in building the Glomar Explorer, that was exploring to be able to lift submarines up off the floor of the ocean. There's all kinds of these things going on. But what you need to do is you need to have a professional, staffed, center that is doing this, and that we bring to bear the technology of the virtual institute so that we can get people to give information into it.
Mm-hmm.
But that we may have a physical plant up there north of San Francisco, on Clear Lake, where we have a big facility where we can store all this stuff. But that may be kind of a past technology. We may be able to store it all in a virtual institute.
Right. And so, I know you guys are starting something up where you'll have tasks from the get-go that will be, transparent to the public, what you're trying to do, so people can try to get involved and understand where their role could be in addressing these tasks and making sure that they come to fruition. And so if there's some more information out there that's credible and usable. But, I talked to Richard Doty a day ago, and he said, the disclosure that's happening now and that may come in the short term is never going to be what the community expects. The military would never admit to any wrongdoing. They're always going to present their case as the good guys that have done the right thing all along and haven't hassled or done anything wrong to people. So how is that going to make your job that much harder at defending Lou, because he's being labeled now as a complete liar in this situation? And how are you going to be able to engage with the military that doesn't want to look wrong in this situation?
Well, we'll see. It's a process, Darcy. You have to sort of undertake the process to figure out what doors you come to, how you get them open. If you can't get in that door, you go in through the kitchen window. You have to figure out how to keep going on a thing like this, but you have to get the process rolling. And you have to maintain credibility. You have to maintain amicable relationships with everyone. You don't want to become involved in who struck John and who resents who's in charge of who's responsible and ought to get credit for doing the citizens hearings on UFOs. Who played what role in revealing what particular piece of information. It doesn't make any difference. If you can get everybody going in the same direction. And so what I'm trying to do right now is to utilize whatever goodwill I've been fortunate enough to be able to develop over 50 years here in these fields, to try to get everybody to come forward and put their information on the table. Stop name calling. It doesn't do anybody any good. You don't want to be naive. If you've got somebody sitting at the table who's there consciously trying to deceive everybody or to destroy the whole process. I don't believe that that's what's going on with Lou Elizondo right now. I believe that in light of his conversation he had with the Associated Press just this past Friday, not even a week ago, that he is explicitly stating that he is convinced to a high degree of certainty that these are not Chinese or Russian or any other planetary foreign, adversary. Now that eliminates an extraordinarily important dimension of the argument that's going on. And if he hasn't yet said that we don't have any of this technology, or he doesn't believe we, it doesn't make a difference right now. It doesn't do any good. Anybody jump down and say, "You rotten liar," it doesn't do any good. What we're trying to do is just find out what people are willing to acknowledge. Just like in any kind of a cross-examination you do in a courtroom. No matter how long a person dissembles or pretends they weren't there when something happened, you just keep on going until all they have to do is admit it once.
Yeah.
Once they've admitted it, you put a pin in it. You say, "Good, now you got that. So let's go on to the next question." So that's what we're doing right now. And the people that have been involved inside the intelligence community and the military community for all these years have a history of misrepresenting things or holding back things or not telling things accurately, etc. That's what's happened. But what we want to do is put a tack in it when they finally make an admission. It's really important, and just keep tacking down those pieces until we start getting a good picture of what they're willing to say.
What kind of support would you look for from the community, from the UFO community, from just the press community? What would you sort of, if you could reach out now and say, "Guys, we need your help"? What kind of things do you need over the coming months to make your job easier so you can get the best case scenario of the best quality disclosure that we all want?
What I want to do is I want to get everybody being willing to come forward with the information that they have. When they have sources of a piece of information that they have made a commitment to not revealing who they are, to let me talk with them to see if we can have a process for me being able to get to talk to the source so that I know what the information is, so we're not getting it on a third-hand basis. That I need to undertake what's known as a Rule 11, preliminary investigation. The Federal Rules of Civil Procedure, when one is getting set to file a major federal civil complaint, to engage the judicial branch in an investigative process of granting us civil discovery so that we can issue subpoenas, subpoena documents, subpoena witnesses, etc. And what you do is you have to follow a Rule 11 preliminary investigation to be able to get enough information into the hands of the attorney that's doing that so that she or he can form a good faith belief as to a particular set of facts, and that you can then lay the facts in front of the court and say, so that if in fact these facts, as we've asserted them, are shown to be true, is there a specific form of relief that the judicial branch, for example, is authorized by statute or constitutional delegation of authority to provide relief for? And that exists not only with the federal judicial system, but with the Inspector General's office, with the Justice Department, with other various agencies. They all have their own protocols for things that they're supposed to be doing. My job as a constitutional lawyer for the people's advocate is to get all of the government instrumentalities performing the affirmative function they're supposed to be providing for the American people, to get over this thing that they're the government and we're not. We are the government. We're the people.
We serve the people.
This is what it's for. They're servants of us.
Right.
And we're not, dumbhead minions that, that they just, keep in the dark and feed manure to. But we've got to do our part. We've got to get up off the couches and stop being couch potatoes, and spend all of our time watching football games or soap operas. That what we've got to do is get busy being citizens. Mm-hmm. And this is a particular area that may well be, probably is, the most important single area of history, of human history.
New discovery.
Yeah, of discovering that there's a whole extraterrestrial civilization that have actually been coming to our planet and interacting with our people that they have access to technology that can rid us of the threat of global thermonuclear war, tomorrow afternoon, or to get rid of the threat of global climate change, to overcome some of the major diseases that we have.
Mm-hmm.
There are things that they may have. Now, we also need to figure out from them, why is it they haven't shared this earlier? What is up with them? I mean, they could obviously, the old proverbial land on the White House lawn. If they wanted to, they don't want to. So we have to find out
I think
why
we
not.
have a history of shooting at them too.
Yeah, but it's
not encouraging them to try and intervene.
Well, also, I hypothesized on myself sitting across the table from some of the people who are extraterrestrial civilization having to defend us. Say when they say things like, is it true? Is it true that you as citizens have allowed 0.1% of your population to control like 85% of all the resources on the planet, and that you guys sit there and take crumbs falling off the table and you accept that, and you actually respect those people? I say, well, that's a tough one.
That's a psychological thing too.
Sure it is.
That is a human thing. Sometimes people don't want to be leaders.
Yeah, that's right. And so I have to try to figure out how to do everything I can do to try to assist our human family in being worthy of taking control back from the elite that think they're entitled to, think they're obliged to, make policy because no one else is capable of doing it, or is interested in doing it. We have to work among ourselves as a population. We have to have diplomatic relationships with the elite inside our governing structures to get them to turn loose of whatever authority that we can get them to turn loose of, and not rely upon them entirely to do so voluntarily.
Right.
And then we have to have our whole set of diplomatic relations with the extraterrestrial beings themselves.
If that's even a possibility.
Well, it's clearly a possibility.
Sometimes,
there's not any doubt about that.
How often do you have a conversation with an ant, though?
Yeah, no, I know, but it's clear that there's an adequate amount of evidence already available indicating that there have been some contacts on the part of some members of an extraterrestrial civilization with some of our human people. So that the fact that they would do that is indicating that there's a means that they have of bridging the gap and having communications with our people. Some people are more credible than others in their accounts of those things.
Right.
But that's part of our job too.
Right.
To dig through those things and
Find
determine which of those. You only have to have one that's completely credible.
Yeah.
And figure, okay, good. Now we got something to work with here.
And there's thousands of cases around the world. Yeah.
Thousands of cases.
It's not just you're going to debunk all of them.
Yeah.
So, okay. In terms of where you see us going in the future, in terms of how we're going to overcome lots of conflicts that are coming up. We're going to have to go through some kind of economic reset. There's talk of cryptocurrency being a proponent to reinvent money, and there's this issue. There's climate change. Everything has somewhat of an equal footing, and some people say, well, women don't even have rights in the third world, and we're talking about aliens. What's most important? And do all these issues get an even footing going forward? Some people still have the snicker factor when you mention extraterrestrial involvement with the planet, and they don't take it seriously because sports and celebrity take
higher priority
with them.
So there are a number of challenges here. There's no doubt about that. But one of the things we need to do is we need to bring clear thinking to the process. Kind of isolating out what all of these different issues are, how they're interrelated. The idea, the issues of an unjust economic system have repercussions for the inequality of women. For example, and the unjust economic structure has repercussions for the global climate change. The dominance of the big pharmaceutical industries has health implications. That they're interrelated. And so what we need to do is get an understanding of how these things are interrelated and try to figure out what things are logistical derivatives of the problem, what are tactical problems that we've got here, and what are some of the strategic problems. So you want to take a look at the strategic challenges that we've got and try to address those, because if you can resolve some of these strategic conflicts, the rest of them start falling into place. Okay, and this is a major strategic issue. If in fact there is an entire extraterrestrial civilization that is in possession of technology that can assist us, that we can
revolutionize our energy,
revolutionize our energy system and rid us of the threat of global climate change, rid us of the threat of nuclear destruction. But we cannot put ourselves in being dependent upon them giving us this or us getting the technology from them. We have to be able to display ahead of time that we're worthy of this. Because if they say, look, if we were to show you the technology we've got, you guys would turn around and try to figure out how to make a weapon out of it.
Blow each other away
and blow your whole self up,
Yeah.
And you're just so silly you don't know it.
Yeah, and that's I come up with that all the time. I speak to people that are not read into UFO or extraterrestrial issue at all. They don't, they could care less. And the truth of the matter is that we're just a higher primate on this planet. We're leaps and miles ahead of the primates that are in the jungles and such. But if you look at a chimpanzee, they can exist in a tribe of 50, no more. As soon as they start becoming 60, 70, 80, they break off, and they become two different competing factions. And humans are very much like that. We obviously exist in a much larger tribe. Like this city has 1 million people, or that city has 30 million people, but we war amongst each other when we split off and become our own tribes. And I think we're still the same. We're still sort of primates, that are warring with each other. And it's going to be really hard to, as we get more and more technology, we get artificial intelligence assisting us in greater and greater ways. Are we just going to stay the same, these kind of primates that are engaging the same behavior over and over and over in the cycle of madness? Or are we going to break away from that and try to be something new, humanity 2.0 or something?
We'll see. We'll see. It's a process that's unfolding here. That what I'm hoping to do, and people that are working with us are all hoping to do with the New Paradigm Institute, is to get some clarification of these issues and get them splayed out on the table so that we see what all these different issues are we have to take a look at, how they're related to the UFO, extraterrestrial, extra-dimensional questions that arise around the UFO phenomenon, and try to determine whether this is, as it appears to be, one of the really truly strategic issues that could help resolve a lot of the more derivative problems that we have on the planet, and understand what the dimensions of consciousness are. There's very clearly some very important role that's being played here with regard to consciousness in this entire phenomenon. And so that this issue of the elevation of consciousness on the part of our human species, which is the subject matter of religious communities and scientific study and everything else, is clearly entwined with this particular issue. So it's the elevation of consciousness on the part of our human species that is at issue here. And so that's going to be a sine qua non. It's a condition precedent to our really being able to help resolve this UFO issue, is to understand what the role is to be played in the elevation of our consciousness. So that if we encounter this technology, we're not, that's the old Sufi saying that, when a pickpocket meets a saint, all he sees are his pockets. And that we may be at that level right now, where you see the entire To the Stars Academy and the entire military-industrial complex. Their entire reaction to encountering a UFO, instead of being, holy mackerel, this is astonishing, what an incredible opening into the universe, is they're saying, I wonder how we can get a hold of that technology and build weapons out of it. Yeah. And you say, whoa, hold it a second. If I were the extraterrestrial people, I would back right off from that. and say, look,
You're like, hey guys, let's not hang out for a while.
Let's hold off on this a bit because you guys aren't ready to have this stuff. So that we have to figure this stuff out, and that's what we're offering to do. I spent 50 years doing all these different investigations, and I've always been assuming that this time would come. When the time arrived that we need to turn all the resources that we have to this particular investigation, and to this particular task of helping our human family come together to meet this moment. And I'm delighted that it's closer to being here right now than it has been in my lifetime. And so I'm hoping that we can keep this door open and push it open wider and get into the next room of our evolution.
Are you going to be working with other folks in like the community, like Richard Dolan and hopefully Stephen Greer?
Everybody. I'm hoping that we're going to be able to get everybody cooperating in helping to participate in this. Do an upward, positive, forward. Upward, positive, forward. And none of the side arguing and finger pointing and all this kind of competing for attention or competing for funding. Let's all get going in the same direction. I'm hoping that people trust me enough to believe me when I'm saying I'm going to try to have everybody be able to participate, that I'm going to be able to discern and help other people with me discern if there's anybody who's being destructive to the process, who's not operating in good faith, who is here to try to torpedo the whole operation. You don't want them inside the tent.
Right.
But I don't believe that includes Lou Elizondo. I don't believe that it includes Dr. Greer. I don't think it certainly doesn't include Dolan or Linda Moulton Howe or any of all the people.
I think Stephen Greer does some incredible things.
Yes.
Even as a young man, where I got involved, investigating his disclosure conference 2001. All that stuff is super important.
Super important. And Steve Bassett, bless his heart. Steve, I was there with Steve the day he arrived in Washington, D.C. I helped him bring all of his stuff out to his sister's house to unload it from his car to put up in her attic so that he could start doing what he wants to do in Washington, D.C. He's been there forever, and he's laboring away at it, and it's a thankless job, no pay, he's everybody, there's so many of the people, they're wonderful people that are involved in this process. It doesn't mean everybody's perfect, doesn't mean that everybody doesn't miscue somewhere,
Sometimes you step on somebody's shoe.
But I mean, come on. Given the importance of this extraordinary issue that we're dealing with here, let's try to keep focus on what's going on here and understand what the positive advantages are in this thing, and understand that there are flawed institutions that we have to deal with. There are people who have devoted themselves to those institutions, so they suffer from the same flaws, but we have to be forgiving as we can, but not be naive and not be foolish. If we're too naive, even the extraterrestrial people won't respect us. These people are so stupid. We have to display the same kind of worthy skepticism that we have for people who are trying to deceive us. We have to be careful here, but we have to remain optimistic and go forward.
My next sort of step is to try and get this conversation edited together and up to social media platforms and stuff, get it onto YouTube. Are you cool with me, sharing this with the community?
Sure. I want what do you call this? Open tech or what? The open source. Open source research. All of this stuff. These discussions are all open. You don't want to be saying things in private that you wouldn't say in public. And you don't want to be saying things to one person that you wouldn't say to somebody else. There's a whole ethos that we have to try to generate here.
Right. And I want to share this with other platforms, like for example, we've got the guys at Third Phase Moon. They're very curious about your response to everything that's been going on. I hope that you don't mind that I share this, but under the condition that it's not edited against what you.
What you should do is just share it with everyone alike, so that the people don't take it and re-edit it and try to make it look like it's something it's not, because other people will have the thing. other people will see what is really being said here. So you don't want people misusing the stuff. But we have to be trusting that people, because if people do that, then they're going to lose out here.
Right.
People are not going to trust them. People aren't going to include them again. If people want to be respected for what we're trying to do here, let them demonstrate that all the time, and don't engage in this kind of nefarious deception and stuff.
Thank you for your time today.
Yeah,
really appreciate it.
Yeah,
cool.
Watch more podcast clips now on our YouTube channel. Go to Livewire Podcast Clips and watch more great podcast videos just like this one.